To acknowledge our university and community supporters. University of Iowa's international programs and the University of Iowa's honors programs, they contribute vital time, talent, and logistics to our program. I also thank the Stanley UI Foundation and for their financial support, and today's special sponsors, Bill and Pat Supel and Usha Balakrishnan. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Blake Rupe. As I said, she's coordinator of a new Sustainable Water Development graduate program funded by the National Science Foundation in the College of Engineering. She's a passionate conservationist and as adjunct instructor in global health studies. She uses her technical skills to research, develop, and teach courses that focus on the intersection of entrepreneurship, sustainability, and global health. And that's what she's going to talk about today. Please welcome Blake Rupe.
Thank you, Dr. Squire, for that great introduction. And thank you to the Foreign Relations Council for letting me be here to present on such a salient and pervasive topic. And I thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to have lunch and share a meal over this topic. I hope I don't ruin your appetites by talking about garbage today, but that's what we're here to talk about. So, since we're here to talk about waste and garbage, I think it's important to define and discuss what that means and what that is. So when we talk about waste, would you consider it waste? Would you consider this computer that's probably sitting at home at your home office desk, do you consider this to be waste? Or is it only waste when it reaches this reclamation factory in central India? Is this cup that's left over from your daily fix of caffeine that you enjoy for the 45 minutes on your commute to work, do you consider this to be waste when it's in your hands? Or is it only considered waste when it reaches the river and you see it and when you walk by the river on a Sunday afternoon? I think that these are all very important and relevant questions to ask when we begin to conceptualize what we're talking about when we talk about garbage and waste in our everyday lives and in society. And the surprising thing is that nobody has really figured out or decided how to uniformly define garbage and waste, because it's very different based on your background, where you're from, what region of the world you work in, your level of education. All of that gives you a different perception of the idea of garbage and waste. And because we see this lack of clarity in our everyday lives with waste, we also see that extrapolated when we talk about waste on an international level, especially regarding policy. So what we see are different rules and regulations, systems and preferences for how we manage and work with garbage and waste. Wonderful, okay. So for example, in Singapore, what they refer to as waste is defined in a very detailed, descriptive way, which you see here, and it's defined by material, by consistency, by location, and by origin. However, when we look at how India refers to their municipal solid waste, they refer to it as in a bit more vague of a fashion, where they focus on where it originates and what it consists of. And then you look and turn the microscope on ourselves, what we here in the United States refer to as municipal solid waste. We refer to it as who gets to manage it and how it's managed. So municipalities deal with it, and it's either burned or buried or recycled or composted. So there's several reasons why we find it difficult to define waste by region, but we also find it difficult to define by category. It can be categorized depending on who you're talking to and who's funding what project. It can be defined by different types of sources, by the rate that it's generated, by the level of danger that it has towards society and towards individual people. It can also be defined by what type of waste it is, or what it's composed of. And it can even be defined by how it's disposed of at the end of its life. If it can be disposed of, if it can be reused, or at all. So what you see about waste on a regional, local, national, and global level is a very difficult topic to talk about, because we're talking about a lot of different things to a lot of different people, which means that regulating it and controlling waste on any of these different levels is a very, very difficult topic, and it's almost impossible. So what makes this topic so salient and important to talk about today is that depending on where you're from in the world, what you're used to, what level of comfort you're used to having, the amount of waste and garbage that you produce as a person is vastly different. So what we see here in the United States is that you probably produce around 5.5 pounds of garbage or waste per day. But if you were to go to Russia or inner Africa, that number looks more like a pound of garbage per day. So these are the pounds when I'm talking about the pounds of garbage that add up to be the tons and tons that we have to burn, bury, reuse, or discard across the globe. Those are the numbers that I'm talking about, and that each and every one of us produce. So what is that garbage? When you're looking at the United States, the anatomy of it, sadly, is mostly food, as we're talking here over lunch. It's mostly food and mostly plastic. If you were to expand this into a global conversation, you're looking at similar numbers, although plastic may be more or less depending on which country you're talking about. But usually these numbers and these percentages are pretty mirrored. So a very common question that I get when I talk about waste across the board is that why should we even care? Is it even dangerous? Maybe it's just ugly, but I mean, is it really dangerous? And the answer to that question is yes, absolutely. First and foremost, the accumulation of waste in our society causes water, soil, and air contamination wherever it's at. And that leads to a higher level of toxicity, as well as contaminating food and water sources. And that could be the food or water that you eat, or the food and water that what you eat eats. So in either case, it's coming back to you. So it causes hazards to all types of life forms. On top of that, it is very attractive to rodents and other disease vectors. So you're looking at a huge increase of communicable diseases spread in areas where you have more waste and more garbage. It's also foul odor and it's unsightly, which means that it reduces the wanted land in an area. And then finally, it increases resource depletion in the fact that the more and more you create, the more and more you use. These dangers end up affecting different people across the globe in vastly different ways. If you were to visit a country like Brazil and were to go take a tour of a landfill, don't know if anybody else in here but me would really want to do that, but if you did, this is what you would end up seeing. You would see dozens and dozens of scavengers and pickers, what we call them, rummaging through the landfill, through all of the garbage to pick out what they could collect to resell or reuse on their own to get money to feed their families and house themselves. Many of these scavengers and pickers are eating food that they find while they're working in these rubbish situations and live in shanty towns made out of a lot of materials that they find in these landfills. If you were to take a tour of a landfill in the United States, which I definitely suggest you do, it's really informative, you're going to find that the wealthy themselves who are creating a lot of this waste are distancing themselves from the process of hiding it. So what you're seeing is machines working nonstop, day and night, to cover and manage all of the waste that is trucked in, shipped in, trained in, and what you end up finding, if you look at neighborhoods across the United States, is that those in lower socioeconomic, on the socioeconomic ladder, and more poor populations are living and working and breathing in neighborhoods with these types of landfills. And one sad story among many is that these pictures are more likely than not going to change. The population is growing at an incredible rate. This picture you see here is just a picture of, with the red dots being all of the cities in the world that have a population of over 10 million people. And on this, there's 24, and that number is growing drastically. And it will continue to grow as well. And with this population growth, what we're going to see is an increase in garbage, because you see an increase in population. You see an increase of people who are wasting and throwing away between 1 and 6 pounds of garbage every single day. So with each presentation, each time I talk about waste and garbage, which is actually a lot, I end up getting in conversations with people about the scope and the brevity of this waste situation. And most of those people that I talk to that don't have an idea about the situation are those who don't have to deal with waste on their day-to-day lives. Because believe it or not, here in the first world country, in the United States especially, we have what we call a conventional waste management system, which means that we take for granted that every day, every Wednesday at 8 a.m., you can put your garbage, your recycling, your tree sticks, and all of your yard waste, you can put everything on your curb, and it gets taken away. When you come home, it's gone. Out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to deal with it anymore. However, this is not the case in most countries. So when we look at how lucky we are to have this waste management system, we're talking about a system that is centralized and undiversified. It is run by a group or an organization of people, either private or public, who do this for a living and do it well and do it on a calendared system in a very dependable way, to where you only have to pay $25 a month and it's taken away from your house. This being said, this is a very capital-intensive process and project for people to conduct. You have to, if you think about the entire system that goes into how your waste gets taken from your home, you have to have all the way from the trash cans and the recycle bins that the city gives you or the private companies give you to put your waste in. You have to have streets that are cleared and clean and able to allow trucks to come through. In the winter, that means snow piles can't be in the way. In the summer, that means potholes can't be so big that trucks can't get through. You have to have the trucks in the first place to collect all the garbage. You have to employ people to man those trucks day in, day out. All the way to you have to have a place to take that garbage, because in the end, this management system is disposal oriented. So the goal is to take it somewhere that it no longer interacts with people. People don't no longer have to interact with it. And so this type of a system is outside of the realm of a lot of people's reality, except for those of us that are lucky enough to live in places where this entire process is being managed and we don't have to do anything with it besides pay a nominal fee every month. Around the world, however, this is not a possibility. And I think the important thing to note, if you want to take away anything from this topic, this conversation, is that waste management in no way is a one-size-fits-all problem, and there's no solution that is one-size-fits-all. So our waste management system isn't going to work in every single country across the board. So looking at what each country has, what each community has, what each region of each country has, and what they're able to do and provide, that's how we're going to end up being able to solve this problem, which I will get to. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the lack of resources available in a lot of populations, a lot of communities, and a lot of regions of the world make it so that our quote-unquote conventional waste management system is just not an option for a lot of these populations. And so what you do see are, like I mentioned before, the scavengers and the pickers that exist in landfills. You see them in developing countries working and living in and around landfills to end up informally recovering billions and billions of dollars worth of materials from these landfills. And what we see is that we're talking about a population of the world that is about 15 million people. It's a lot of people doing a lot of work in pretty hazardous conditions and situations. But these people end up having an economic impact of millions and millions of dollars for countries and for communities. However, these populations of people are predominantly ignored, poor, exploited, and repressed. And when we talk about them, we're talking about pickers and scavengers who are usually recent migrants. who are fleeing situations and looking for jobs and work. And this is sort of easy to do. It's pretty, I mean, it's labor intensive, but it's easy to get into. They're unemployed, usually widows, they're disabled, and then they're elderly, they're children. They're people who are needing to find a way to get food and money and housing. They face very high health risks given the problems that waste can cause, and they have a much lower lifespan because of the health risks and the dangers they face on a day-to-day basis. Socially, they're often seen as a nuisance and a humiliation to the populations of the country who are actually creating the waste that they're rummaging through on a day-to-day basis. And usually they're grossly exploited by middlemen in the recycling process. But when we talk about these groups of people, we're talking about millions and millions of people. And when I do my research about the social impacts of these populations on societies, we're talking about people who go by several different names in several different communities in different countries. Latin America alone has dozens of names that they call these populations of people. So important to take that into consideration. And there are several myths about them. I've already been guilty of saying a few of them so far up here in this presentation. Mostly that they're indigent and extremely poor. While some of them are, there are groups of these scavengers, these pickers, who've created micro-enterprises of businesses that are saving countries and communities and companies millions and millions of dollars by collecting materials that they could reuse. For example, if you were in the cardboard recycling and collecting business on the US-Mexican border, you can earn up to 10 times more than the minimum wage just by doing the cardboard recycling at that place. So not all indigent, not all poor, and some are taking advantage of the fact that this is a very big industry. And this picking and recycling and scavenging in this way has been around for as long as there's been garbage that's been laying around. So about 5,000 years, we've been able to find back in history that this population of people have been working. And again, they end up diverting billions of US dollars from landfills every single year by the materials that they're able to collect. So this is a population who's doing a great service and getting absolutely no credit for it. So while here in the United States, we don't see a lot of those pickers and scavengers in landfills, because it's illegal to go in there and do that, you do see them in other parts of the waste process. If you think about it, I know of a janitor in the Siemens Center where I work who has who goes around and picks up all the trash from the building, but then he also brings his own black bag and he picks out all of the cans and bottles and takes them in and redeems them. That could technically be considered someone who, on the side, is doing picking and scavenging. So while we don't see this in landfills happen so much here, we still do see a lot of landfills. What you see here in this picture, the green dots are actual landfills that are in operation today, and the blue dots, a little harder to see, are landfills that have been closed and either turned into a park or, unfortunately, sometimes housing unit areas. It's not a problem that we are not experiencing here in the United States. Landfills are all over the place. And unfortunately, the people who live and work and breathe in the neighborhoods around these landfills are those that are of lower socioeconomic standing. Towns and neighborhoods and populations of people who have a less loud political voice end up living and working and breathing around these landfills here in the United States. So this isn't a problem that's only happening outside of the United States. So this waste problem is not one that's going to be solved by me, by the state of Iowa, by the President of the United States. It's just not going to happen that way. The people who are actually going to be solving these problems are the people, entrepreneurs, community members who are living and working and breathing in communities with waste problems, who come up with solutions and start working to change the outcome of their area. So I want to share with you, I have personally met dozens of different entrepreneurs across the world who are creating businesses and enterprises that are solving the waste problems in their local communities, in their regions, in their neighborhoods. So the first one I want to share with you is Edouard in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and this is a picture of him. He created EXA in 2010, which is a recycling business where people around Port-au-Prince and in Haiti can collect plastic, aluminum, tin, and bring them to him, and he will pay them for those materials. And so since he founded this in 2010 after the earthquake of Haiti, because he wanted to clean up the streets of Port-au-Prince and also get a way for people of Haiti to start working. And so 6 years later, he now employs 6,000 Haitians to collect these materials across Port-au-Prince and in other areas of Haiti. And at this, I think it was last year's totals he sent me, were he ended up collecting and compacting and shipping just plastic bottles alone. He collected 300 million plastic bottles, which is 1 million bottles a day that he was able to collect and ship out and sell through this business. And then I met Amr in Cairo, and Cairo has a whole neighborhood of people called the Zabaleen, which is 70,000 people who have been outsiders for generations, who are the unofficial garbage collectors of Cairo. They don't have a great waste management system, so this neighborhood of people decided to get together and become that system of people. And today they are the most sophisticated, unofficial waste collection and recycling organization in the world. These 70,000 people go door to door, collect trash from the people of Cairo, and every day they sort through 15,000 tons of daily garbage that they're able to pull materials from and divert from landfills in the waste stream. And these guys are the most efficient recyclers in the world. It's fantastic. When I was in Japan, I met Jonathan, who's on the right of this picture, and he is the co-founder of WeCyclers, which is a company in Nigeria where they have no waste infrastructure at all, from streets to trucks to anything like that. So what he created was a company that uses bicycles, which are all over the place in Nigeria, and he fashions carts to the back of them and goes around Nigeria and collects the garbage and waste from the households. And he's also starting a separate movement to power social change and environmental change within the people of Nigeria to take action in their own communities to solve this problem. And then when I was in Rome, I met David, who runs a textile factory in India called Pure Waste Textiles, where they take the plastic bottles like those that Edouard collects in Haiti, that Amr collects in Cairo, and that Jonathan collects in Nigeria, and he turns them into clothing, yarn, and t-shirts like you see here. Just to give you an idea of where, when I say they're collecting this waste, it's going into projects like this, where they turn them into things that we actually use on a day-to-day basis. So these are just a few examples of some of the entrepreneurs, scavengers, business owners who are out there around the world making a difference in their own local communities. I'm excited. I'm heading to Barcelona and the Philippines at the end of May to meet more people who are doing things like this, and they're changing their own communities and paving their own paths. Because, again, it is this innovation that can change the needle and slow the progress of these bars. So this is the increase, the green line is the increase in population, and the blue line is the increase in waste generation. So if these, the trajectories continue, and this path continues, we're not going to be a planet of life anymore, we're going to be a planet of garbage. And it's the innovators around us that can make these changes that we need. And so if you want to, can you make change in your own life here in Iowa? I urge you, I challenge you for the month of March, try not to use the waste garbage collection system that we have in place here. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't have this option. See if you can prevent yourself in the first place from creating waste. From there, try reusing what you do have, or what you do create. Recycle or refurbish what you can. And then, when you end up getting waste that you have to dispose of in some way, I urge you, just for the month of March, try carrying it, driving it, biking it to the landfill or to the redemption centers so that you can see for yourself what people have to do when you have to carry the weight, the actual weight of the burden of the trash that you're creating, and see what an impact that has on you. Because in the end, I guarantee you that you will start to see garbage and waste from a much different lens, like Mahmoud here and the Zabaleen in Cairo. He sees garbage much different than we do. And it is because of this realization and understanding that you can get from doing this process that leads to the creation of these innovative and passionate programs and entrepreneurs. And it is this mindset that is what's going to change the fate of garbage and global health problems in the future, and hopefully in turn change the fate of our planet Earth. Thank you. I will take questions.
With that, let's start with the questions. We start with some definitions. Blake, can you distinguish gleaners from pickers, economically, socially, politically?
The gleaner. I don't think I've heard that term before. Oh, well, that would be why I've heard that. So what is a gleaner to?
They go through the fields. They go through the fields after the harvest.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and pick up like extra food and stuff that gets left behind. I mean, honestly, I think that they're economically, socially, and politically in the same boat. They're the people who are forced to, either because of the way that they're othered or ostracized in their communities, they're forced to do these lower socioeconomic status jobs where they are forced to, it sounds like, do something very similar. Just ones with food and ones with garbage. Although the people who are working in as pickers and scavengers, like I mentioned, do a lot of the time end up having to find their food in the waste that they're rummaging through. Yeah, this is a good question. I have to look that up.
Okay, and a related question, I guess, is are pickers allowed in any U.S. disposal waste dumps or sites?
Yeah, that's across the board usually a no, because the way landfills are set up here, they're very scientific processes and they involve heavy machinery, and so people generally are not allowed without scheduled tours. They're not generally allowed to go through those areas, and just outside of that, there's also a lot of processes that if it's a private landfill especially, that they don't want you to see, because they're quote unquote environmentally friendly under the fact that they follow guidelines set aside by our political structure, although if you're environmentalist like me, you know that they're not really that environmentally friendly. So they don't want a whole lot of people seeing the entire process of landfilling, because it's kind of gross, I don't know. And it's also terrible for the environment. But yeah, does that answer the question? Sorry, I got my own tangent there.
Okay, now, here's a challenge. Any suggestions as to how we reduce the production of waste in things we use? How do we create less waste?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the number one thing to think when you're using things is this a single-use item, quote-unquote single-use item? Is it a plastic straw, a plastic cup, a coffee cup that you get at Starbucks? Is it something that you are honestly going to use for a day? It could be a day, it could be a week, it could be 10 minutes, but then you're never going to use it again. Because those are the things that you can generally replace with something that you're going to use permanently. So if you go to Starbucks, you can take a mug and they can fill it for you instead of getting a plastic or paper cup. If you're at an airport and you need to get a bottle of water, make sure to take a reusable bottle with you, because you can take empty bottles through security. You can't take full ones. So instead of buying plastic bottles on the other side, it's those daily decisions that you make that make it a lot easier to reduce that waste, because the biggest waste that we see are those single-use items, the things that people only use once and then throw away immediately, or also cigarette butts. So one way to get rid of waste is to stop smoking if you smoke.
Thank you. Yes, and cigarette butts are some of the most intransigent forms of waste. They know they are toxic and they never go away. That's just my anti-tobacco plug. Okay, staying locally, how effectively do Iowa City, Johnson County, use or transform the materials we put at the curb for recycling? If this is effective, doesn't it serve the same purpose as the entrepreneurs that you talked about elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and I think Iowa City does a really good job compared to other places. When I talk about waste collection, I was going to mention this, I totally forgot. So when I mention waste collection here in the United States, it is still, especially in Iowa, in the Midwest, you still see vast different experiences. So here in the United States, or here in Iowa City, we have a great waste management collection system. It's fantastic. Although a lot of people wish you could still get rid of glass at the curb. So it's still really great. Where I grew up in southeast Iowa in Ottumwa, my parents had a farm in the middle of nowhere. There was no waste management system. So to this day, they still burn their waste. And it hurts my soul that they do that, but it's the only option for them unless they want to set up a time every month where they go to the landfill and still dump whatever it is that they have. So the difference is, when I say the United States, it's still a pretty broad brush. There are still communities in the United States that don't have access to curbside recycling, to curbside garbage removal and stuff like that. But getting to the point of the question. So the Iowa City does a really great job with the markets that they sell the stuff to that they collect. So glass recycling, or glass, plastic, paper, wood. They have great markets and great people who buy those materials. So those go to a great place, and they're doing an amazing job with that. The one thing that I think is missing from Iowa City that I think the city is trying to fix is if doing apartments, doing mostly the college part of Iowa City is having a rough time getting people and a system in place that can collect that. So I think that's the biggest challenge for Iowa City. Good question.
Okay, so now we have another view about Iowa City's system. When I spent a sabbatical in Germany, I was astonished at their system of waste management. So detailed, complicated. 25 years later, we in Iowa City have not even approached their systematic methods. What should we do to improve our waste management system?
Yeah. I think the biggest, like I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest obstacle is that you can't and won't collect things that you can't do something with. So the city and the state of Iowa, they're not going to collect number 7 plastics if there's no one who's going to buy that from them when they collect it and they process it. So I think one difference between Germany is that system has a lot of people on the other end who are buying what people are recycling and selling. So if we had better markets on the other end of the recycling process, and people who want to make t-shirts and make roads and things out of the stuff that we're collecting, if there was more of that industry here, then I think we'd see a lot more people want to recycle, and then it would become a much more robust system like they do have in Europe. Yeah. Another good question.
Okay, yeah, lots of local questions. So this is for you as the entrepreneur. If someone in Iowa City wants to start a recycling initiative, how would you suggest they do that?
Oh, easy. There are a couple people I already know who are, especially with glass recycling, like I mentioned. That's a thing that a lot of people want help with or want people to work with. So I would say find what someone isn't doing. Composting is a good example of that. I think the city does do some compost collection. The university used to, and they don't, and some places do and don't. So I think composting and glass are two areas that I think you'll get good response or good clientele from. But that is the big thing, is getting people, if you want to start a recycling company, getting people to pay you to take their stuff and then finding something to do with it when you have it. It's not hard, yeah. And I think there's a couple people that do glass recycling in Iowa City and make a pretty good profit at it.
This is clearly a local issue. We've got more questions. So apartment buildings have had no waste management program previously. Has this changed at all? And then I guess, not slightly related, the tire burning at the Iowa City landfill a few years ago. I don't know. I think that was an accident, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't actually. Okay, two things. So the first one was
apartments. The problem with apartments.
Oh yeah. So where I think where they're at on that is the resolution passed to put in place and to fund a program to collect apartments and and some dorm stuff at the university level. So that resolution, or that committee passed that. So now I think they're putting into place how they do it, how they pick it up, who gets it. So I think they're infrastructurally figuring out that part and what makes sense fiscally for the city to do that, which is great. Definitely keep supporting that initiative. And then the second part. Now I see one of these 6-part questions.
The second one was the fire.
Oh, the fire.
The fire.
Yeah, so that actually,
Yes.
I didn't think that was a tire burning. I thought that was, so
I
don't
think
know how that
tires
word even
caught
started.
fire.
So yeah, so there was a fire at the landfill, but the reason it is caught on fire because the way landfills work is they compress garbage down, and then they pour dirt on it, compress garbage, pour dirt on it. So the lower levels get really, really hot. And if the leachate, well, all of the water and stuff that forms when you get down that deep, if all of that gets too hot, it catches on fire, especially if it's drier. So it was a drier year, landfill got drier, so it caused a fire, and that's actually a problem that most landfills around the world face. Is there's always something burning all the time when you're in a third world country landfill, either on purpose or that's just what happens when you get really hot garbage that's really dry. So that's what actually happened at the Iowa City landfill, is the garbage in the landfill caught on fire, and once that starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. You just have to wait until it stops on its own. Pretty fun.
Okay, Blake, this is really for you. I've heard of a great recycling app. Can you tell us what it's called and how it works?
Yeah, that was my first, I think the one you're talking about is my first initiative that I created was Reap, which challenged people to catalog what they recycled and what they threw away and what they reused on a daily basis, so that you could see over a day, over a week, over a month, over 6 months, the impact you were having by recycling, by reusing things, and how much that reduced your carbon footprint. So that was that one. That was really good. It's called Reap. Yeah.
Another one about Johnson County. What does it do with the lawn and garden waste that it collects? Is it buried?
Yeah, so they have, I think they put that in with the compost bins, the compost areas, if I'm not mistaken. And so then they turn that into compost that if you follow their social media or their website, they will let you know when you from the community can go and get good, usable compost from the city. So that's where they end up putting all of that stuff. It's just, they compost it.
How do you feel about the incineration of waste as they do in Sweden?
Yeah, that's a much more difficult one. Sweden is interesting, and most first world countries that have incinerators, because their incinerators are designed to be more environmentally friendly than if you're incinerating in my parents' backyard, for example. It's designed to collect all of the effluent and everything that is produced from the burning and use that as power throughout Sweden, as well as using the ash and stuff that's collected too. So it's a little different in Sweden. I still would prefer that we reduce what we use and send less to incinerators, but that is considered to be one of the more quote-unquote environmentally friendly ways to get rid of waste. Yeah. It's good.
Okay, a great array of questions, but there are several on this, so let's end on the political note. Please comment on the Iowa legislators' proposal to eliminate the 39-year-old bottle can deposit bill. Oh.
I don't even know where to start with this one. So we are only one of 8, 10. There are not very many states in the United States that have bottle bills like this, where you can redeem bottles and cans and stuff for 5 cents, 10 cents if you're in Michigan. But I will say, if you go to any other state that doesn't have that, you will see just so many more just littering the roads and the streets, and and just adding more and more and more to these landfills that have to get filled up and covered up, and then we build parks on them, or we build apartment complexes on them. So the idea of getting rid of this just absolutely blows my mind. It costs almost nothing to run this program, and it generates profit every time. So it makes no sense to me why they would want to do that, for those listening.
Okay. That's a great political finish. So thank you very much, Blake, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So in concluding, I want to thank our sponsors, University of Iowa International Programs, University of Iowa Honors Program, Stanley UI Foundation Support Organization for their support. We also thank today's special sponsors, Bill and Pat Supel and Usha Balakrishnan, and City Channel 4 for making our programs available. And finally, as a small token of our appreciation, we have the coveted ICFRC mug. Blake?
Thank you.
Thank you all. That concludes our program.